Why is it that today's top 10% own roughly 75% of all the wealth? You may have heard such numbers before, but there is something more frightening about this one. This percentage of wealth inequality is the same that it was 700 years ago. It is the same today as it was in feudal times.
The amazing thing is, if we even go back to medieval England, rates of social mobility were just as high as they are now.
Today, billions of people feel like they are running on a financial treadmill, working harder every year, but getting nowhere. But what if the most widely accepted financial advice, save up, buy a house, live the dream, is all mathematically designed to keep you broke and has led to mass inequality today on par with feudalism? Look, I grew up in public housing after my family migrated to Australia from Ukraine when I was a child, and conversations about money and rent were constant. Since then, I've been lucky to have spent over a decade investing, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't by the numbers. What I've discovered is the way buying a home is taught is designed to make you poor, because the current game means if you buy a home for, say, $1 million to own and live in and pay it off like most do over 30 years, you will pay over $2 million in total.
You nearly always pay double.
I wish this was a joke. It's not. Now, it's okay if you've already got a home or are thinking of buying one. This video explains how you can finally stop paying double and outsmart the system to get back on average from $500,000 to $4 million of money earning potential you'd otherwise have lost. But first, we need to see why this has all happened. Why are hundreds of millions of people stuck on the poverty treadmill? It all comes down to one asset: property. It forms the largest share of global wealth at 57.5%. It's so big it beats the value of global stocks, bonds, and gold combined. Property makes up the largest share of people's personal wealth as an asset class in most countries. 67.9% in Australia, 52% in the UK, 40% in Canada, and 38.3% in the US. This is what we call the property monopoly. The board game Monopoly was literally invented to demonstrate how property creates inequality and poverty. But what is most scary about this is that it is too similar to feudalism, whose classical definition is the structuring of society around land in exchange for labor. And further, what is weird about the data is that in feudal times, only the top 10% owned all the wealth, which was the land, the castles, and little homes. Yet what's strange today is over 66% of the population own property in most countries. So why are we as unequal as feudal times, even though so many more people own property today? Because most homeowners own and live in their properties with a massive mortgage that they're paying off for 30 plus years. The system brilliantly confuses you into thinking owning property equals building wealth, even though owning makes you poorer as you have less spare cash to pay for weekly expenses. If you didn't have to pay off the mortgage, you'd be instantly better off. Now flip back to feudal times and peasants paid the lords through their labor. But today, workers pay banks through their labor. And here's the brutal math. Based on figures I found for most metropolitan cities in developed nations, owner-occupiers can pay up to 50% plus of their entire weekly income on housing, and renters pay around 33% of their entire weekly income. When banks raise interest rates, mortgage holders pay more, and rents for tenants increase, housing is hands down the largest expense to anyone's weekly income and the largest contributor to cost of living statistics and inflation readings. And I've lived this myself. When I was more naive and paying off my mortgage, my spare income just disappeared, which explains why the statistics show most people have around just $1,000 in their bank account, not enough for even an emergency. This large burden helps explain why credit debt keeps on growing in developed countries, because you need to keep going back to the bank to get money on credit to just survive. Now, quickly, do you remember earlier our definition of feudalism? It is shockingly similar to the financial situation most people find themselves in today. Today's economy is based on the structuring of society around housing in exchange for labor. As housing eats up more of people's incomes, people cannot save and so cannot build assets. And so what used to be a real middle class slowly dies off. But the most common solution when costs increase is to work more, work harder, find a higher paying job. Because the media marketing by the banks and real estate companies is so good that most people see paying rent to someone else as dead money. And that's one of the arguments that keeps this entire home ownership idea alive. It pushes people into paying debt over 30 years, which impoverishes them. But what if you didn't have to pay off your mortgage? And it's here that hopefully the light bulb flashes forever for you, because it's what billion-dollar bank marketing will not tell you. But hold on, mortgage is debt, and debt is bad. Most of us have heard this mantra since birth. That's what most seek to pay off their entire mortgage, and they're paying off principal and interest loans, when in fact, they could be paying just the interest portion only, freeing up tens of thousands of dollars for themselves yearly. What's fascinating is the top 10% under feudalism, the nobility, whose whole wealth was based on property, did not pay mortgages. They were given the property by the king or queen in return for military services and paid something called scutage, a payment similar to interest. This is a major reason the nobility in feudalism got wealthy, whereas today, when you buy a $1 million property, as I said earlier, at a historical median interest rate of 6% over 30 years to pay it off, you'll pay way over $2 million for that $1 million property. You basically bought your home twice, once for yourself and once for the bank. Yet we're sold that buying a home is the greatest investment you'll ever make. But for most people, it's the greatest expense they'll ever have. That lost $1 million isn't just money you could have used to avoid being working poor for the next 30 years of your life. It's extra money you could have invested at an 8% average yearly return in, say, a stock market index fund to build real wealth, potentially millions, which I'll explain shortly. The problem though is that most owners see properties selling in their street and suburb and think, hey, I must be getting ahead. But in reality, they're not wealthy where it matters, in their bank account. They're wealthy on paper, assuming that property, of course, has grown in value. But day by day, this property of theirs has turned them into the working poor, especially if that homeowner is on a mission to pay off their loan over 30 and now these days over 40 years. But what's the end goal of all this? When will they actually access that wealth? The answer statistically is most never will. They will actually pay till they die. Data I've found shows only 33% of homeowners have paid off their property in Australia, US, UK, and Canada. And the average age at which they pay off that property hovers just past the age of 60 and can even take longer. By that age, many but not all will become, as my granddad says, a professional patient, where each week is full of blood tests, doctor's checkups, carers coming in and out, and more. All that struggle, all that sacrifice, using every trick to put every spare dollar into paying off their mortgage, weirdly is never repaid, never rewarded. Rough estimates are that there are tens of millions of seniors who live in million-dollar properties yet have no income of their own. Let that just sink in. These tens of millions are relying on government welfare and pensions to survive. They've turned from being the working poor and have become now the living poor. Here's the grim stats. In Australia, 73% of age pensioners are home owners. In US, 78.6% of retirees on Social Security are home owners. And in Canada, around 75% of pensioners are home owners. In the UK, almost 90% are also home owners. But why has this happened? Because many of these hardworking folks saw rent money as dead money and saw paying off their home as building an asset, which, as mentioned, the home builds anyway. Paying a mortgage is just putting money into a bank account which you can't access for 30 years. As we showed, A homeowner usually pays more than a renter would and have made themselves cash flow poor for decades in the process of doing that. A more subtle reason for paying off that property is, of course, the family memories the home has built up, plus the need to live somewhere. The best figures for countries mentioned estimate that around 33% of homeowners will never sell their property. But here's the crucial truth. The majority of price growth in a property comes from growth in its value from the purchase date to today's date. This represents the bulk of what's called equity growth. And we need equity growth in order to build wealth. But some will say, hold on, aren't there loans to access your equity anyway? The problem is you were taking out a loan just for the right to access your own wealth and paying bank interest rate for the privilege to do so. But there's a problem. Most don't have enough yearly income to qualify for an equity loan. And ironically, it's those who rely on government pensions, like seniors, who've accumulated the most equity yet can't access it. So unless the home is sold, equity becomes dead money, frozen inside the walls of a home. The paradox is that these asset-rich, cash-poor folks will, like in feudalism, upon their death, pass their property wealth onto the next generation, some completely undeserving of inheriting it, who ironically will do what those who died refused to, and that is sell the property to extract out that wealth and put it into their bank account. This transfer of inherited wealth replicates the upper class. As best figures estimate, property comprises 70 to 90% of the bulk of assets that are inherited. As one wealthy person dies, another takes their place. So what is the solution? Strangely, there's a strategy not discussed enough, even on plenty of videos here on YouTube. Instead of buying to live, you buy to invest. You have more money in your bank account. Equity growth comes from comparable properties fetching higher prices in suburbs boasting essentials like supermarkets, public transport, schools, and more. This is especially true in major cities where renting is very expensive. As financial educator Ramit Sethi did the comparison for us in San Francisco's suburb of Palo Alto, showing that renting is 50% cheaper than buying to own. As I'm mostly based in Sydney, Australia, I'll be doing a comparison on this 2-bedroom apartment located in the center of Sydney City, showing how buy to own versus buy to invest changes the numbers and the life financially of someone who does it. At current prices, this apartment can be bought for $1 million. Remember, apartments are becoming the dominant type of housing worldwide. Apartments also tend to be less costly due to less maintenance. Now, we did a buy to own, meaning you live in it, and the numbers show us this. Annual expenses of $74,352. You have mortgage, council, insurance, and some maintenance costs. Now let's compare this to doing the same purchase as a buy to invest. Means you'd rent this property out and you'd rent somewhere else. You'd gain weekly around $1,050 if you rented it, and you'd be able to find cheaper rent yourself for $550 just 14 minutes away, as seen here. In an instant, you've saved $500 per week. Another renting option is house sharing, where you as the homeowner live in one of the rooms and rent out the rest to tenants. But this is ideally with properties with 3 or more rooms. But it's not just the rental money saving part, but you've also changed the loan type to interest only. You're now not paying off the mortgage, which I call dead money. Now this change saves you $218 per week. Now add that to the $500 rental saving and you get $718 extra per week. The buy to invest results in this situation a total expense for you of only $36,825. Your total savings is more than double what you would be paying for buy to own, $37,527 per year. Over 30 years, that adds up to $1,125,810 more in your pocket instead of the bank's. That's already massive. Now here's where it gets almost unbelievable. If you invested that $721 saved per week into the stock market index funds, which have long-term average yearly returns of 8%, then you'd have around $4.6 million after 30 years. It's a mind-boggling sum that I've put compound calculators into the description for you to check it out. So let's just recap. The two major reasons rent vesting, as I call buy to invest, cuts your expenses in half is: one, you earn more renting out the property to tenants while renting cheaper elsewhere yourself, and two, as you change the loan to interest only, you now pay less monthly to the bank. What most forget is the bank does not care if you're not paying off the loan. They only care that you're paying them interest, because the way banks make money is mostly from the interest they charge. But unlike credit cards, you're paying interest here on an asset, property being one of the few that can actually grow in value and generate you rental income. I do urge you to try calculating this for your area, but the trend holds directionally well, as many countries have similar costs in buying or owning a property. To be clear, I totally get that convenience matters. You may need to be near friends, family, or work, which is actually where the house sharing option can assist that I mentioned earlier. Tens of millions do this already. Please, if you walk away with anything from this video, it should be this. The point is to pay the least you have to the bank and then sell the property. You become poorer when you put more money to paying off that loan, locking money into the mortgage without seeing any return for 30 plus years. If what I'm saying is starting to connect the dots for you, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And please join my free newsletter to gain access to upcoming members only behind the scenes videos at vitog.com.au.